Hello, and welcome to the 6 Pixels Under podcast. This is episode 32. I am Nerd Slayer, your host. And on this week's podcast, we will talk about Dragon Age 4. We will talk about League of Legends or Riot Games, more specifically, facing an employee walkout. We'll also talk about the Halo Master Chief Collection possibly being a little bit delayed in regards to how they do their flight testing. And then later on the podcast, we'll talk about the MMOs On The Go segment, which has some information about Jagex and their recent record-breaking year for revenues. Of course, that's the developer of RuneScape. We will also talk about the success so far of Albion Online's free-to-play launch. We will go into Kurtzpell and their recent launch and how it hasn't been so stellar, and possibly is already offering weird microtransactions like allowing you to buy underwear. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Shroud of the Avatar apparently deleting a particular thread that was in regards to a novel fulfillment with regards to their Kickstarter reward. So we'll talk about that. City of Heroes has another rogue server up, so of course there's always more to talk about in that regard. And then finally, the rumors about Disney acquiring Nexon. Are they true? We'll go over all of that and more. Of course, we've got the call-in segment at the end of the podcast, which you guys can call in and ask me any question you'd like, either during the podcast, if you'd like to ask me in voice, you can @ me in chat, or you can @ one of the moderators currently running the podcast. Right now, I don't know if I have anybody on the floor, but if nobody shows up, Card says he will show up. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to @ me in Twitch chat or @ Card in Twitch chat. And then if you'd like to ask me a question on voice, you have to join our Discord. That's discord.gg/nerdslayer. And you can either react to any of the topics that I'm going through, or if you'd like to ask me a specific question at the end during the call-in segment, feel free to do that. Okay, we got all of that stuff out of the way. Let's get some topics out of the way as well. There's been a recent news thread concerning Dragon Age 4. Many are speculating that this is probably going to be BioWare's next big focus due to them kind of putting out a less than stellar hit in Anthem just recently. Let's see, let's get that on screen. Dragon Age 4 becomes BioWare's next big focus as Anthem loses its lead creators. So according to Chad Robertson and Ben Irving, who are currently working on Anthem as the live service head, which is basically the guy that would tell you that it was that I was running or not running rather, is 100% committed to Anthem. However, the original story outlines that they are focusing primarily on Dragon Age 4 and getting it out of the door. Several reported reboots of different RPG sequels, it says here as well. Okay, so basically this gets raised because they lost one of their lead creators. And then not to mention, and we'll confirm that the game's lead producer, Ben Irving, and head of live service, Chad Robertson, are now the ones spearheading the game's post-launch cycle. So a producer and a guy who's the lead of lead service is now in charge of running Anthem. I don't know. Does that make anybody else feel suspicious? Or am I the only one that got suspicious from that? I feel like if those are the two guys you have in charge of your project, it kind of means that maybe you're trying to make something work. That makes sense. So according to the article, it says Dragon Age 4, meanwhile, is reportedly another crack at a live service game from BioWare, with online elements that would pivot the RPG series from its single-player roots to something more of a, I don't know, I guess what Anthem is, semi-multiplayer. So don't expect it to be popping up as one of the games at E3 2019. All right, so we're not going to see anything anytime soon for Dragon Age 4. Let's see where they've got this article. Oh, so this was reported about a month ago. All right. I won't run it on this site, I promise. Are you happy? Dragon Age 4 may incorporate live service elements, but won't be Anthem with dragons. It's just so silly that Like, I get that you put this in your article, and you would definitely put it in your title if somebody told you this. But I don't know, it just always makes me laugh because it's like, would they actually say otherwise? Like, would they say it is Anthem with dragons? No, probably not. Oh, by the way, I'm glad I haven't still gotten rid of this damn thing up in the top left. Why do I still have this up here? Alright, I got rid of that. Thank you for subliminally mentioning that. You like subliminally mentioned that. Thank you for the bit donation, Snakehound, and also the sub. I appreciate that. Welcome to the Norcloud, man. Fedora tip. Yeah, it's just a little bit suspicious. To put my thoughts out there because I know I'm thinking a lot in my head today. It like Dragon Age 4, make no bones about it, is going to be BioWare's big focus. Not just because it's a big title, it's a big IP, especially a big BioWare IP. I mean, let's just be honest here. They're not doing so well as a company. BioWare has put out 2 less than stellar projects, and people are pretty angry at them. With EA not afraid and more than willing to throw them under the bus, I fear for a lot of the people's jobs that work at BioWare at the moment, just because I feel like they're working under, unfair working conditions, which can typically impact how, the quality of a product is received. So if there's too much pressure and diamonds don't get created out of it, well, then you have a lot of people burnt out, you have people quitting. I mean, basically you have the story of Anthem, right? So if we get another Anthem-like story in Dragon Age 4, every time you see like something fall apart in regards to Dragon Age 4's development, it's not like crazy to think that, maybe this will result in more crunch time. Maybe this will result in more people working when they're not so happy. Maybe this will be another project where no lead creative wants to take the lead. That's the sort of stuff that I worry about with Dragon Age 4. The difference between that and Anthem is, yes, Mass Effect Andromeda was a blunder, but I don't think it was an Anthem level of blunder. Anthem has been a blunder since basically its inception because people expected it to look a certain way. It didn't look and play that certain way that they expected. So it already has been under fire for a while, I feel like. Dragon Age, though, is a more established IP. I can't help but feel like a more established IP is only going to get, brought through the ringer even more so. So I brought this story up this week really because man, it's getting more solemn and solemn for me whenever I talk about BioWare, because I don't really see this story playing out a whole lot of other ways. I mean, we've seen this story a couple of times before. They've already been acquired, so it's not like being acquired is another like possibility like it was for like a company like Obsidian, who got, acquired by Microsoft. But BioWare in this case, I mean, is it crazy or ludicrous anymore in 2019 to say we might not see them in the next 5 years? It's becoming less and less crazy to say that, and I feel like that probably would have been crazy at some point. Not that any of us expected them to make Dragon Age and Mass Effect games forever, but I mean, we definitely expected something more than the quality that we've been getting, and I can't help but feel like the more and more you push your creative talent away, the worse you're going to get at creating, creative games and games that are innovative. And then you're going to have to work more so on good margins. And when you're working on more good margins, that means the marketing and all of that stuff has to work, because if it doesn't work, I mean, what else are they going to do with BioWare? Because like when you have an established IP like BioWare is, once you have something like that kind of loses a bit of its allure, like let's say they put out a bunch of really bad games and nobody wants to like trust their new games anymore. Even their existing audience is going to take a severe hit because of that, because they have a certain expectation. And so they're only going to be able to sell on name brand alone for so many more games. I guess if that makes sense. They're only going to be able to sell on their name brand for so long. It's already, I mean, we have massive cracks formed already where many people are already speculating, is this even the same company, right? I've brought this question up before. I've also brought it up with a couple other companies. But in BioWare's case, it most definitely seems to be the case. Many of the original developers and founders of the company who worked at the company don't work there anymore. And it can't get any more honest and straightforward than that. That doesn't necessarily mean that the company will be bad forever. It just means that it's trending downwards. And when you're trending downwards and you're a company that's ran by EA, I think that means curtains are not out of the realm of possibility. I think Bioware maybe is thought as a company that's too big to fail. I think that is no longer the case. And I also don't think that too big to fail really is a thing unless you're protected by the government, which video games so far aren't really protected by the government. So, I mean, well, besides Peggy and, all that basic stuff, but I'm talking about from sales and microtransactions and that sort of stuff. If anything, we kind of need more of that right now, don't we? In other news of big, giant conglomerate developer companies and publisher companies in Tencent and Riot Games, League of Legends hasn't been doing so great lately. And that's not because of the game itself, but because of a lot of drama surrounding the game. There was another... It did not like me going to this website. Am I really not going to be able to find the article anymore? I'll just Google the title. By the way, guys, here's my like god tier level way of finding things on the internet is just type in the title and then look for something on a cached perspective. Sometimes you can find something. Work that time. Or sometimes you can at least find like the forum thread, right? Is that what I got here? No, this is still only parts of it. Huh. I think it's I'm currently running on a VPN. I don't think it likes my VPN IP right now. Huh. Anyway. That's weird. Let's see what they say right here though. So this was reported, and I can mention that a number of I guess this story has been unfolding basically this whole year. If you haven't been following the whole Riot Games story, there's been this whole idea that and thing being brought forward, I should say. It's not just an idea anymore. People are providing evidence to this. That the working conditions rather at Riot Games haven't been so great, and more specifically in the way that they're running maybe their kind of like culture. And when we say culture, it's a very broad thing, but possibly accusations of sexism, sexual harassment, a bunch of different things like that. It's sounding like a real frat bro house over there at the moment, and that's kind of what's been coming out, essentially, if you haven't been following the story. Riot then filed a motion to block current employees from taking legal action. This particular reporter, by the way, Cecilia, I've used her articles in other bits of my work before. She does good work, so I mean, I guess I say that to say that this is something that's definitely reputable. So there's been a lot of like bad juju coming out about Riot, and it's only gotten worse. Unfortunately, I can't show the article for whatever reason, but they've continued to take steps from preventing employees from taking legal action, and they've had multiple lawsuits filed already. So that being said, they did let out a bit of information, I guess a press release, where they promised that changes, big sweeping changes were coming. Of course, they have to promise that, because at this point, is anyone going to believe them otherwise? But because these have been ongoing reports, and Riot has had a number of issues for now, I would say probably at least a year or two, it's looking like change is actually finally going to happen. At this point, it doesn't really matter if they just keep saying things. People are going to expect either heads to roll or some big change. And it's just a bit strange and not good for your image whenever you're expecting people to be policed in regards to their beliefs or the way that their attitudes and such behaviors are in game, when you can't even enforce things from the highest level. So when you are accused, in this case, Riot Games as the developer in question is accused of having toxicity, I mean, it ends up kind of like, to me, diminishing the whole idea of toxicity within like a game like League of Legends. And I can't be the only person that thinks about something like this, where when something is called into question, why not just question a lot of it now? Like in this case, like if they're questionable at the start of where they created these rules and where they created how they arbitrarily come up with assigning punishments and things like that, it's only natural, I think, to then start to question them as well. So it's weird because I bring this up not as somebody who currently plays League of Legends anymore, but really somebody who's just been watching the story unfold, and I'm curious to see where it goes from this point. I hope all parties end up getting their, just solution, whatever that ends up being. And I also hope that this is something that we can get eradicated. I think this is a good time as any for me to rant a little bit. We've been pretty tame today. So I'll go ahead and throw it over to my soapbox segment, which is, of course, the segment that I use whenever I feel like getting up on my soapbox and ranting a little bit. Speaking of culture, let's talk about culture. So gaming culture is really this giant, broad spectrum of things. Like, it's too impossible to even explain exactly what it means, because the beautiful thing about gaming is that, primarily speaking, right, it came from the PC, it came from the internet, and so we got to play online with other people. You got to meet other people. Gaming is often referred to as this very anti-social thing, but remember, only a single or a couple different variants of single-player games are the ones that have essentially no life online. Other games may be lobby-based games, maybe co-op games, and maybe just full-fledged massive multiplayer online games, of course, have multiplayer components, therefore rather social components. So my rant today is just around the idea of gaming culture and what that kind of means. I think when people talk about culture, they always have to explain what they mean by culture, because culture is such a broad thing, and frankly speaking, it means many different things to many different people, right? Because everybody has their own different culture based on where you're from, based on how you were raised, etc. But with regards to gaming, let's be honest, it's always had like a culture of sorts. And I think this culture has changed, of course, as culture does. But in the case of gaming, one thing that's always just blatantly annoyed me is that there are many very negative stigmas that get associated as being like the gaming culture, and we kind of just accept them. Now, good examples of this are sexism, are things like being exclusive and not inclusive. There are things where it's like we're very gatekeepy. And I know I can be that way myself. We don't like casual gamers, right? Because it's like, oh, you guys just come in here, you want your flashy graphics, but you don't care about substance, right? There's a lot of these negative stigmas and aspects of culture that get explained and that either currently exist or get called out a lot. And I think with gaming culture, it's either been described as being this very toxic environment where women can't thrive and people that are different can't thrive. And I just think that that's all just total bullshit. I should say first, there are very toxic environments out there. And frankly speaking, it is true that many of them can be sexist and things like that. And I am absolutely not okay with that. But when I say bullshit, what I mean is just, I don't like the idea that when people bring up gaming culture, again, they bring it up like it's just so monochromatic, like it's just one color. And I bring this up because it's like when I grew up, guys, I was different, right? I was not the normal kid. When I went to school, I spent most of my time reading. I just wasn't really interested in my classes. I didn't really fit in with the school that I went, right? I even though I was smart enough to be thrown into the you're way too nerdy, gifted and talented programs as a kid, I was never interested in it. And it was because it like basically segregated me, right, from my friends. Like, it separated me from them in a way where I didn't feel comfortable. I saw that as a negative. Like, why am I being separated from people that I like? In reality, it was more so me as a young kid struggling with my identity, like many of you have, I'm sure, watching or listening now. And that's kind of where the internet made many of us safe, I would say. The internet became this place where we all could share different ideas. We could have all different kinds of perspectives. The internet is really the first time I met like foreigners. Like, I never knew people from outside of North America. And then the internet kind of like introduced me to so many of them. It opened me up to so many different perspectives. But to bring it back to culture, it also helped me feel for the first time like I belonged. Because I liked video games, and it was fun playing video games and talking about them and role playing and all of that stuff. So the internet, despite being a place that's often described as being very toxic because of the culture and this and that, it's inherently been a place that many of us have thrived, and many of us who are different and maybe not so typical have thrived maybe where they haven't in person or out there in the perils of the real world. I bring up the whole stereotype stuff because there's another really annoying aspect of it. And it's kind of like people have this idea that when it comes to gaming, gamers are kind of referred to almost like as a third-class citizen. And I might be sounding weird here, so let me explain. You look at whenever other cultures or other genres kind of get involved with gaming, and look how it comes out. Whenever movies take a stab at gaming adaptations, it's always like so over the top, so cheesy, and they never rely on just a simple basic storyline that comes from any of the games that they cover. You guys notice that? Like whenever we have film adaptations, they basically never follow the same plot. And I'm not saying that they have to follow it one-to-one, but this is like a thing that I've noticed when it comes to gaming culture, if you will. It's like people in the film industry, they look down at us. I think they kind of look down at us. I think they look at gaming storytelling and they're just like, that's not really like a proven medium. So we'll just change all of that. We'll add some more dragons or whatever, and it's going to work just fine. And it's just like movie adaptations for video games have been notoriously horrible. And I can't help but feel like it's because it's movie people trying to do movies about video games instead of video game people trying to do movies about video games. Like it's kind of like it's different. It's like if a video game rather tried to make movies, it's like oftentimes it's not going to come across so nicely because you're handling essentially not only just a different medium, but if you're going to handle it without any knowledge or I guess I would say patience with dealing with a different medium, then it's just not going to go across like so swimmingly, sorry. And you notice that like there is kind of like people look down at gaming culture still in 2019, even in other mediums. Movies are like, you guys don't know shit about plot. You don't know how to tell stories. And then, TV series are going on and they're these living, breathing things. And they're telling us, oh, you can't do stories. We can't adapt a video game to a TV show. Like that's not a real thing. When it does happen, it's not really well received. That only works in the case of anime, right? There's so many like stereotypes and statements out there that exist. And this is kind of like my general thoughts on what people generally look at us as, like gamers, if you will, which always feels weird saying that out loud because you never think that, I guess, when you've been involved in it so long. And so maybe that's why people get a little bit gatekeeping, because they hear other people refer to themselves as a sense of identity, because these days it is kind of like part of your identity to be a gamer. And I think that's where where things are changing as well. Before it was like you were a gamer like in public, which meant like you were like kind of keeping it a secret, like hiding yourself. And nowadays people can scream it from the rooftops. I'm a gamer, woohoo! And it's almost like a badge of honor now. Now you can be like, I'm a gamer. And it definitely has kind of went up and down over time with regards to how it's been perceived. If there's one stereotype, and this is where you guys can clip me if you'd like, if there's one stereotype I would like to die in nerd culture, it's the idea that nerds are only smart and have nothing else going for them. This is something that I really wish could get eradicated because, first off, video games take a lot of hand-eye coordination. So although you might have the penciliest of nerds, the skinniest of nerds playing an esport, an electronic sport, or a professional video game, if you have one of them playing that game, sure, they might be rail thin and break if they picked up a football or something like that. But you're telling me you don't give them a little bit of time to get a little bit more physical, to learn physicality? Because the biggest advantage in life, guys, the biggest advantage, you can look this up. There's many different studies to back this up. And frankly speaking, I think it's kind of like self-explanatory. But whenever you're born, and the first thing that you first gravitate towards is typically the thing that you're going to have the most proficiency in. So let's say you're a young kid and you've been in, I don't know, physical fitness your entire life. Having that advantage as a young kid is a massive advantage. Well, get this. In video games, many people have that advantage. They get to play video games being a young kid. Now, mind you, it wasn't necessarily that way when I was young. It's changed a lot these days. But can we any longer imply that a gamer is somebody who's not coordinated? I mean, at this current stage, video gamers put in more hours than athletes do. That's just a fact. And I can say that as an athlete. Somebody who, trains pretty much like 4 to 5 times a week. I play way more games. Like, just to give you guys some reference here. Last week, I put 7 hours in of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I was on the mats for 7 hours. I played way more video games than 7 hours. So there's overwhelming kind of culture that I'm like barely even diving into now. I'm only tackling certain aspects of it. But it's like, it's based around the idea that gamers are lazy, that gamers, you know, they're not the real medium for storytelling, so games aren't where you go for that. It's all about reading or watching movies. They'll say that gamers are you know, skinny and uncoordinated. We can't do anything. Like, we're just lazy. You know, is our video games really a sport, right? And then it becomes, once that's questioned, now it's becoming. We talked about this on the podcast last week, but now it's becoming, oh, it's not a real job to play video games. It's not a real job to make content on YouTube. It's not a real job to stream. And so I bring this all up to just kind of tackle some of the more negative stereotypes that surround gamers, but also just highlight that I think many of these we can put to rest already. The last one that I haven't mentioned so much yet is just the idea that the nerd is the virgin and the Chad is the, or sorry, and the jock is the Chad. This is 2019. This isn't high school anymore. And not to mention, even if it was high school, it's not like high school in the movies or in the TV shows. No longer do we have to keep this really stupid and ancient stereotype that nerds, if they pick up anything in the real life, somehow just turn to like dust. We just like disintegrate. When we're forced to do like manual labor, like picking up this cup, I'm just like, ugh, and like my body just like disintegrates. Like, this stereotype just gets really old because that stereotype gets then prolonged into other ones. Like, so they take that as the starting point to be like, oh, you're lazy because you sit in a chair and you play on your computer. And then it becomes, it's not real storytelling. And then it becomes, it's not the best medium for storytelling. And then it becomes, oh, like, it's an exclusive culture. Or now it's too inclusive. You see what I'm saying? Like, the goalposts get moved constantly whenever you're allowing people to prescribe negative connotations to an overall culture. It's just too difficult to say that of an overall culture. We can't speak about gaming culture in general statements. It's just too difficult. There's too many types of gamers. Are we talking about people who play on League of Legends? Are we talking about Overwatch people? Because that's a special brand of cancer. Are we, you know, and even then, on those platforms that are not necessarily known for having the best gaming culture, they're still good people. So I bring this up to say that a lot of these stereotypes that have existed for basically the entire time I've been interested in video games, they still exist. And people want to pretend they don't, but they still exist. And I'm kind of getting to the point to where I think it's time for us to start getting rid of a lot of these stereotypes. If you like to play games, if you're a nerd, if you love creating characters, if you like looking into things and having things analyzed, if you like to learn about new games, even maybe a new genre that you're not even like, you know, privy to, maybe you've never even played an MMO and you're just interested in them, you are the people that I very much want to be interested in gaming. I don't want those people to feel like it's exclusive, because I get that vibe from people sometimes. They're like, oh, you know, I follow your stuff, nerd, but I don't really like to get into MMOs, or I don't really play them. Well, it's like, that doesn't mean you can't watch my videos, and it also doesn't mean that you can't then try them now. In fact, I recently had a chat with a guy. He was the first person to donate in my $50 tier, a 1 hour chat or like a consultancy, whichever you prefer. He just wanted to chat with me. So we chatted a lot about Kickstarters and what was exciting and current MMOs and old MMOs. And this guy, he didn't even play MMOs before. And he's been just more so recently interested in them now. And hearing him tell me about how he's interested in them now, despite not being interested in them before, that's the kind of stuff that gets me excited. So this was my long-winded way of basically saying, look, I know a lot of, you know, stereotypes exist about gamers, and I'm sure many of them can be true in certain instances, but let's just treat each other, you know, let's just treat each other the same. Let's just give each other the benefit of the doubt. If we at least afford each other that, hey, if that's all you're willing to give somebody, which is typically all I'm willing to give somebody, then fair enough. but I think that gaming can certainly be a more inclusive culture. It doesn't have to be exclusive. That being said, it's absolutely going to be exclusive when it comes to business interest. What I mean about that is that gamers, I think in a lot of ways, we end up getting classified as being very exclusive. And I think it's more so because we're used to people treating us like shit. And what I mean is like developers and publishers, more specifically, we're kind of used to being treated as like second-rate customers. And what I mean by second-rate customers, okay, when I go to a restaurant and I don't like my particular food, I can say I don't like my food. It's very oftentimes very normal for the manager to then deduct that from my items overall, or to then try to provide me some sort of like equivalent exchange, because they don't want me to not come back, because me not being a repeating customer means more than just being a single customer who can then just eat shitty food and never come back, right? In video games, though, it's not really the case. It used to be that way. Subscription fees were kind of like going to a restaurant. You expected a certain level of service. You wanted your food to be a certain way, aka your experience. But things have changed, right? Gaming, and more specifically MMOs, are less about the brick and mortar experience, which is like the sit down, full scale restaurant experience, and are trending towards more something like, fast food. And so whenever you trend towards fast food, you inherently get worse service. And so I can't help but feel like we're in that transitioning phase where we've been treated, not so great by a couple different MMO companies, developers, publishers, and the like. But also, we're transitioning out of this whole brick and mortar business, and things are becoming a lot more fast food. And so the service really suffered for a long time. I mean, look at ArcAge, look at Ark Survival Evolved, look at Black Desert Online. These are games that have very, very negative stigmas, very negative reviews. I mean, I would say I think they're like neither of them are above 50% positive reviews on Steam. I'm saying all of this to describe how things these days don't really matter as much about service, because even though they have such negative stigma surrounding them, people still play the games. They're still spending so much money in those games. And so you could say that's because there's nothing else on the market. But I'm starting to see at least the negative aspects of that. That business model of the fast food business model, where you don't care about your reoccurring customer, you just kind of care about turning profit, which, by the way, I don't want to necessarily see this analogy as 100% accurate, because technically speaking, businesses out there, fast food restaurants, do want reoccurring customers, because, I mean, that's an important part of their marketing, right? They always sell to the reoccurring customer. They sell you new deals and new, like, oh, the McRib or whatever. Like, I don't really remember like specific marketing things. So they want reoccurring customers. But now we're seeing MMOs trend away from that. And when MMO companies trend away from wanting recurring customers, to me, what it means is that they're just focused on the profit aspects in the short term. Because when you're focused on the profit aspects in the short term, you don't care if you burn a lot of your player base. Look at games like Star Trek Online. Look at games like Star Wars, The Old Republic. These are two particular games, Lord of the Rings as well, that hemorrhage a lot of their free-to-play players. But it doesn't matter if they hemorrhage a lot of the free base of players, because they can monetize a lot more, right? So they're just monetizing even more. They don't necessarily care if they lose that loyal whale, as long as they pick up another whale. So this is just like a negative thing you've seen trending overall in the market, where as things become less about being user-friendly, being appealing to the consumer, and not only just appealing to the consumer, but also having the consumer's best interests in mind, it becomes more about the corporate interests. And the corporate interests, this is, by the way, this is all tied together. The corporate interest goes back to what I was saying earlier about whenever we have people involved in the culture that feels like it's outside of the culture, and gamers have felt kind of exclusive. I think it's because these outside suits, these outside business guys, especially in the MMO realm, came in with their big briefcases of money and were like, hey, we're going to make a WoW game. We want to get some of that World of Warcraft's money. We want to get some of that Ultima Online success. We want some of that Asheron's Call success. They all came in with their big suits and big briefcases, didn't know a whole lot about gaming, didn't know a whole lot about MMOs or even just creating IPs, mucked up the whole market, really, if we want to be honest, caused the bubble to pop. Once that bubble popped, well, now nobody's really interested in the space anymore, except people who are already deeply ingrained in it. or obviously Korean companies, even in this case of Square Enix, a Japanese company. So MMOs by 2019 have definitely fallen to the wayside compared to where they were before. But this is kind of like another ranty, I've got my soapbox here, so bear with me. But this is my way of kind of describing how the change of culture in gaming, I think in many ways that exclusive nature, the exclusivity as it seems from the outside, was more so, especially in the realm of MMOs, because we were just tired of being treated like shit from these companies who weren't gaming companies originally. So I think that's kind of why it was that way. And not to mention, remember, being a gamer early on was not something you could talk to people about. So it was inherently very niche. So whenever something is niche and you go on and you go online, which is the beauty of being online, right? That niche thing now becomes a big thing. So now all of a sudden you feel like, well, I don't feel alone anymore. I can be a gamer. There's gamers all over the place. Well, nowadays, gaming is a lot more acceptable in general, public. And so we're seeing like a shift, I think, where that old exclusivity now is starting to look like gatekeeping. It's starting to look like we're a bunch of old people, old veterans, if you will, telling the young whippersnappers that, none of the good MMOs on the market work. I understand that, and I understand it comes across that way. But the thing that I can keep saying, and I will keep saying until the end of time, is basically, we don't want old games. We just want the new games to be better than the old games. So if somebody asks you why you're playing Classic WoW, or why you want to play Classic WoW, or why you're playing the City of Heroes Rogue server, or why you're playing Star Wars Galaxies, the emulator, or any of these classic MMO servers, why are you not playing any of the big popular MMOs? You can just tell them, hey, I will play the popular MMOs when they're better than the old school MMOs. And when that happens, then, we won't have to keep talking about the old ones in the light of, hey, maybe we should go play the old ones again. It'll be more of like awesome, the old ones existed. They provided the framework for the next generation of games. And now the next generation of games is learning off of that previous generation. That's what I want. I don't want to be stuck in the past forever playing on classic servers. I've mentioned this before, and I will always be steadfast in this. The idea of a classic, vanilla, whatever kind of server you'd like to mention, some old emulator of sorts, that's a great idea. For me, it's all about preserving the culture, preserving, more specifically, the art, right? Preserving a work of art. Past that point, though, there's just so many what ifs at the moment. We've talked about this before, and we talked about it a bit last week, but there's so many what ifs. Can the communities even running these games legally operate? Can they even, turn a profit? Can they even take donations? What is the ceiling? Where does it go? If it's just about maintaining, I'm absolutely for maintaining more MMO servers. That being said, I don't want to stop there. That's not where I want to stop. Maybe you guys want to stop there, but I don't want to stop there. I'd like to go further. I'd like to see if it's possible, if the community runs servers, can, run their own servers without all of these other copyright laws and IP laws, and frankly speaking, just draconic like laws that shouldn't or either shouldn't exist, or at this point, I think there's a good case that they're a little bit outdated, or there's not enough regulations involved for what I guess should take place whenever you go about rebooting a game or keeping a dying game alive. I don't want games to keep dying, and I certainly don't want them to be being put on this life support of sorts, and that becomes the future for what MMO gaming is supposed to be. No, I don't want to play City of Heroes the rest of my life. I don't want to play Classic WoW the rest of my life. I don't want to play really any particular game the rest of my life. The idea is that with more time and more competition, not only do we get more MMOs, we get more innovative MMOs, we get bigger scale MMOs, maybe even more niche MMOs. We get more risky ones, more bold ones, ones with new designs or maybe particular IPs that haven't been explored before. For me, it's about the constant iteration of just the MMO genre in general, right? If we can keep that working, if we can keep the MMOs overall, in the broad sense, evolving, then we're going to have a never-ending amount of MMOs that are going to keep coming out in the next coming years. That being said, right now, things do look a bit like they're on the wire for a lot of different games, simply because Kickstarter is kind of like the big thing at the moment. We haven't really seen anything come from Kickstarter, and so unless Kickstarter does put out a good MMO, I really think it's unlikely unless one of the previous MMO companies like Nexon or NCSoft or Blizzard or one of the other big companies, unless one of them put out a new, big, innovative, great game, we're going to get more and more of the same and more of the same. This genre, the MMO genre, is the most riskiest because it's got the grandest scale. And frankly speaking, anytime you turn a closed circuit world into an open circuit world, you're just opening up possibilities, but also the amount of things that can go wrong are going to be exponentially higher because of coding, because of server infrastructure, because of maybe like server to network coordination and how like client side and server side tech works. And you have all the technical jargon, but you also have a lot of the other things, like say, for example, people exploiting things, people taking advantage of bugs, and people hacking and hack protection, community run events and stuff. You have to be active. You can't just launch your game and do nothing with the community. There's so much that goes into running an MMO. I guess I just hope that we don't get caught in the past with them completely when these new slew or old new, let's call them old new slew of relaunched MMOs come out and are doing quite well right now. I don't really see that as a negative thing. I see it as a completely positive thing because to me, it's proof that the old stuff worked, which I already believed. It's proof that the old stuff worked, but it's more so the way I look at it. If I could put a bow on this discussion, I look at it as the more failures that happens, the more learning that happens, hopefully. And so in this case, these videos on my channel, these Death of a Games, these MMOs that died, I hope these games can find some sort of life in the future. Maybe from a distant inspiration, maybe a spiritual successor, whatever the case may be. MMOs are like life, right? It's this living organism that's constantly evolving, and it's not just one game. It's this idea of massively playing multiplayer games online, and more specifically, role-playing games. And that's just a great idea. And it will always be a great idea in my eyes, because RPGs are great, but you involve other people, and to me, it always makes it a better experience. I love MMOs. How about that? Can we just say that? I know it's hard to be a fan sometimes. I look at the MMORPG subreddit and people are like, oh, what are you doing in the meantime? Are any of you guys even playing MMOs? Like, what is everyone playing right now? I know it can be hard, and that's why for many of us, we've been finding a lot of solace and frankly, enjoyment in playing the old school games. But when I suggest for you guys to play old school games, I don't suggest you to play old school games because those are the only ones that worked. And because nostalgia is the number one thing. It's so you can actually critically examine those games and think, why do they work? And then look at current games. Why do they work? And maybe not work. And compare the two together. And I think what you'll find is what I've been finding, which is there's a lot of wiggle room in between being the old school, like more niche, nerddom based MMO and being like the super popular mainstream MMO. There's middle ground. We don't have to give up all of the difficulty, all of the consequence in order to have a fun, appealing game, right? WoW proved that. But we also don't have to get rid of any semblance of challenge, and we don't have to start removing bits of identity of things. Say, for example, I brought up Elder Scrolls before. I brought up WoW's BFA expansion. There's so many things that go into it, but I just love MMOs. How about that? That's a good way to end it. I just love MMOs. Sometimes it's in some archive of a big company that acquired the company. Do you need to be in the Discord group to ask a question or call in? Yes, you do. You do. You do. You can check GOG how they found... Okay. What are you guys talking about? I agree that they should let the fans maintain if they want to. Maybe some kind of deal akin to the old OGL D&D had. Oh, you mean OGL deal that D&D had. Gotcha. Full of Dark says, copyright hasn't stayed up with the digital age well. I totally agree with that. I can talk about this topic on a voice a bit. I have a few talking points. Okay. Yeah, we can talk. I'll go ahead and drag you in. Hey, what's up, Germa2?
Hey, so just kind of going back on that topic of like a little bit at least about the whole gamer culture thing. I think a lot of it is just, at least when it comes to the, I guess, MMO market, is part of it is the fact that a lot more developers are casualizing it, which isn't a bad thing per se, but it's like it's dumbing down a lot of things and it's kind of making the games become more, I guess, repeats of each other. And I think you brought this up where it's like every game is kind of the same in a sense. And it's like it kind of was before, with everything trying to be like a WoW killer or a League killer, sure, where it's the same game with some things somewhat different. But now it's like even when they're not trying to beat each other, a lot of these MMOs are just the same thing, just reskinned, and not in a good way in a lot of the sense, I guess, because it's like, okay, I don't know, say for example, two games which people will say, oh, they're different, but to me they're kind of the same. It's like Black Desert Online and Vindictus. Like both those games are really flashy. People say they have great combat, but then like their glaring issues in a lot of ways are the same. Whereas Black Desert Online is very grindy and debatable, pay to win. I think it's pay to win, but some people say, oh, it's not, whatever. And Vindictus has a lot of that as well, but then a lot of the other issues are kind of to their own game. So I think, in a sense, um, at least with I guess current games especially, you just see too much of the same thing. And it's going back to what you said where, people will say, well, why aren't you playing, Black Desert Online? Why aren't you playing Albion? Why aren't you playing like this big next game, whatever? And you're over here playing this old game. Why is that? And it's like, because there's nothing that grabs my attention to get excited for this. Like, granted, I'll get interested in a new game, but I won't get hyped for it. And I mean, you understand that feeling for sure, because it's like a lot of games, they hype themselves up and they build up this excitement, like, oh, this is the big new thing. You're gonna get so pumped, and then it's like disappointment. And it's like you said, a lot of it comes down to, at least with MMO players, they're just so used to being treated as second rate customers that you just get jaded and you start to kind of like hate most games when they come out unless you really get a feel for them.
Yeah, I think that especially with MMOs, especially because they haven't satisfied many of our thoughts and expectations. And I think that's because it's so hard to do, because it's one of those things where maybe tech hasn't caught up with our imagination yet. I think that's another aspect. So many of us who want these virtual worlds are not getting them. So we're kind of like, what the heck? We thought we were going to get this before. It's 2019. We're still not getting it. And that's kind of where I end up taking the most issue is I see a lot of people hand wave things and just say nostalgia, nostalgia, nostalgia. And I just find it really insulting. I find it really insulting actually from a design perspective, because if you just take a critical time or critical eye, a couple, even just like 5-10 minutes, go play one of these old school games and actually try and like play it as in it's a real world. And what you'll find is that not only is it way easier to do in those old school games, you'll actually pick up on a lot of reasons why. And they're simple reasons. They might not, sorry, I should say that they might not be noticed by most people at first glance. But things, for example, like NPCs, the way they move, the way players interact with each other, the community. When you load in, are you thrown into a world, or are you kind of just dropped off in some random place? Like, do you feel connected to the world that you're involved with? There's so many things, obviously, that go with it. But I just can't help but feel like a lot of people will just say the nostalgia thing because they're trying to either excuse their reason for playing current MMOs, which is like, guys, you don't have to make excuses. If you play them, just play them. I realize when I make videos that talk about why I don't play games, it's triggering. No matter how many times I say it's my opinion, I piss people off. And I don't really know why, to be honest. I don't know why in 2019 people can't take people's opinions for what they are. But that being said, it clearly pisses people off, and I think that's why they do it. I think that's why you hear this nostalgia insult and, oh, you just play the old games because of this and that. It's because they either feel insulted that they play the current generation of games, or they think that you look down on them. And when people think that you look down on them, they are very aggressive towards such a thing. And to set the record straight, at least from my perspective, it's not about looking down on a game like Black Desert Online or any of the other games that we mentioned before. It's actually just comparing them. It's comparing them to previous games. And even comparing them once you divorce all of the nostalgia, once you divorce all of your emotions from it, and just look at their features on a list. It's not even close, guys. Like, we're not having this discussion because my nostalgia for Star Wars Galaxies is next level insane, even though it probably is compared to most games. It's actually because if we just look at its feature lists, it's still better than most games. So, like, I think it's actually pretty easy to explain it in that perspective. But yeah, I guess to go back to what you were saying earlier, it does get a bit annoying whenever you see kind of, I guess, a more general audience get introduced and they don't understand what the consequences are of playing games like Black Desert Online or supporting certain like bad business models. They don't really understand it because they're kind of like not really a part of the market yet. You know, they're barely getting involved. So for many of us, maybe we seem more exclusive or more kind of like, what's the word? Standoffish. It's because we've either heard the song before, the song and dance from these different companies. Like you said, we've been hyped up before, we've been let down. Or it's also, we're looking at the past and seeing better than we see in the future. So it's almost like it's just hard to look forward for many people because it's like, when is the next game going to come out? People are tired of waiting.
Right. And I think, and I hate to kind of blame it, but it's like you said, you have all these people who, like you mentioned before with one guy who donated to your Patreon, he never had any interest in MMOs. Now he's getting an interest, and it's like, it's good that he's wanting to do research. The problem is a lot of these new people who never have, they didn't play these older games. They didn't see like these other games that came and went that failed and bombed for a reason. They didn't see these horrible and just overall crappy business practices, and they see it with this new game, and it's like, well, I don't see the issue. I just think it's more of, you need to get over it, or, oh, what's the big problem? Like, I'm fine with paying for this. A good example, not really an MMO, but just like a general thing, was the recent Battlefront 2 with Star Wars. Like, I remember discussing that with a group I was in. This is when I still use Facebook, and this guy just kind of chimed in and was like, "Well, I don't see the issue with all the microtransactions. I'll gladly pay for it. Unlike you guys, I don't have you know 10 hours a day to be playing this game just to grind out like a skin I want. So what's the big idea? Like, it's like you guys don't care about my feelings, and it's like, that's not what we're talking about. Like, and you try to explain what, just your side. Like, for me, I try to explain my issues with it, but then it becomes like you said, oh, so you're looking down on me, or you think I'm stupid, or this and that. Like, they assume things, or they get the wrong impression. And as much as you try to diffuse that, or change their minds to, see it in a sensible way, people just would rather be, I don't want to say aggressive, but like, just very straightforward about it, and they don't see it, like you said, without your emotions. They just get the emotional response, and that's it.
Yeah, and to go back to one thing you mentioned before, which is really related to my Black Desert video I did, is people do oftentimes have that mentality of like, hey, if I do it on my own, then like I'm doing it on my own. Like, don't hold it against me. And it's like, no, okay, so like no one's gonna hold it against you from a personal preference perspective. However, we can hold it against you from a market perspective because you're part of the problem. So whenever I bring up topics like Black Desert Online and really just other MMOs in general, like a couple of them in particular, I don't want to bring up the particular names yet, but there's examples I always bring up. When I bring those up, it's never to like seem insulting to those who play the game. It's more so, here's the matter at hand. You can accept that and play it regardless, or you can do something about it and don't play it because either at a principle you agree with my principle, or maybe you agree with my particular point of criticism, or maybe you formed your own criticism and it's not a good game for you. But what I don't like is when people bring up arguments about microtransactions. That's kind of one that's annoying to me because it's kind of like you're making an argument for the enemy team. It's like this, like, right. It's like you go to a game and you're going to compete against this other team. And then you're like, right as you're about to compete, you're like, you know what? I'm gonna make a good case that the other guys should get the ball first. Everyone's like, wait, what? Like, what do you mean? Why would we give them the ball first? It's like, well, hear me out here. Hear me out. Like, it's not for free, like they're also playing for something here, so maybe we should just give them the chance to get the ball first. And everyone's gonna be like, dude, we're competing against each other. Like, why would I want to help this team out? And it's like the same thing I see all the time whenever I'm having consumers, aka customers, explain to me why it's okay to be gouged by publishers and developers. And I'm sitting there like, guys, I'm trying to help you. You're the person that I'm trying to help. You're the person that's being taken advantage of by this business model. Now, if you holistically buy into it and you know what to expect, spend the money. I mean, like, I'm not going to say what you can or can't spend your money on at the end of the day, but I can say that if you do continue to spend your money on these microtransactions and supporting shitty business models and shitty companies, like, to throw in another wildcard studio reference, if you keep supporting these kinds of companies, they will continue to do, guess what? The same exact shit. So it actually does end up hurting you in the long run if you just kind of adopt that mindset of like, oh, I'm just going to play and it's whatever. Like, I'm not really worried about it. Like, microtransactions, like, it seems kind of fair to me. I don't really spend that much money on any other game, so this is fair. It's like, no. That kind of mentality is why it becomes normalized in the first place, because people start to think that it is normal. It is normal to spend money like that. And that's why a lot of these Asian MMOs, and I know you've played a lot of them as I have, whenever they come over to Western markets, they don't always do as well. And I think it's primarily because of that aspect. In China and Korea and these other Asian regions, it's very like acceptable to just pay for your strength, to just pay a lot of money and be good. There was an article that actually, I think it was not an article, it was like an AMA or something like that. A guy who lives in China and I think was involved in gaming. He mentioned like the cultural differences and why like maybe they don't care about pay to win as much. And what he said is that in China, it's part of status. Paying more money is part of your status. So it's kind of like it's not negatively received, if that makes sense. Because like when you spend money on it, you deservedly get whatever you deserve because you spent money on it. That's kind of their culture. They believe if you have the money, you have the means, you pay for the item, then you deserve it. You're worthy of that item. And so there's also that coming into play as well. It's a total different culture. And so whenever it comes over to the Western market, it's successful in the ways that it is successful, which is like looks and it's pretty. It has like typically more so fun and hands-on gameplay. Very appealing marketing-wise, especially to the Western audience who's used to tab target games. But then it also brings in this whole other slew of like different business model and all that other stuff.
Yeah, and to kind of go back to like the Asian market one, I can tell you a perfect example. I don't know if you ever played it, but the game that always comes to mind for me is one that I got really into for a few months called Age of Wushu, and I'll never forget because at like a glance, it seemed like the perfect kind of game for me. It had like it had combat, it had gathering, it had farming, it had like all these different like side things you can do on top of the combat, and it's like open PvP, and it's just like as cool as like kung fu MMO. Like, let's get into it, and then as I start doing more and more research and getting into it, I get into a guild, and I have like actual Chinese players from the original one, and I'm starting to like see all these things like paywalls and the whole VIP system. I'm like, well, what's going on? And I remember talking to one of the guys, and he's like, oh, like, man, this common, like you said, in China. Like, it's a status thing, and it's not uncommon to see people blow, at least like on this game in specific, close to thousands of dollars, at least in terms of like US, like, conversion, just casually. And it's just like it's crazy because I think a lot of it, at least over there, is because there's not really a middle class. You're either like upper class or lower class, and like these guys in the upper class, like for them blowing like $500 in a day worth on like an MMO, it's nothing. It's nothing to them. And they don't see the issue with something being pay to win or very, I guess, predatory in that respect. Or like another game I can always remember, I think it's called like GT Online or something like that. They have probably the craziest. This is like the earliest example, like a loot box to me. But they have a system where you get these bags from drops, say like an NPC drop. It's like a sack, and or it's like a chest. Something I don't remember the exact details, but you get it and you buy a key and you use it, and it's like essentially a slot machine, and you can get either like a really good item or like the crappiest item ever. And to me, it's like that's insane. It's insane because it actually takes precedence over grinding for like a piece of gear from a quest or just doing quests. Like people bought into this, and it's insane to me that, like you said, China, it's no big deal. It's just you get used to it, whatever. And to me that's scary because there's people here who accept that, which yeah, and like someone said in the chat, is it's gacha, but it's like that's the whole game. That's like the whole game. It's like a slot machine. And it's like I don't want to play a game of slot machine. I already hate loot boxes in general. And you know, for some games, like you said, I waived it, but it's like now looking back, it's like I shouldn't have, because then like now I'm regretting it. Overwatch is like a big thing, especially with that. People say, "Oh, it's cosmetics. Who cares?" Why? Why should you accept that? Whether it's cosmetics only or not, you shouldn't be accepting of that. You should be able to earn cosmetics. You should be able to buy them directly, and it's disgusting to me. It's ridiculous.
I think the annoying thing, and I think this is where we can agree. First off, the annoying thing is that the discussion ends up getting muddied because you have people saying, "Hey, these people shouldn't be allowed to make these certain microtransactions," and then I'm sitting there like, guys, they have to make some money. So like the game can't be completely free. But then you have people then making the argument on the other side where it's like, oh, it has way too many transactions. So it's kind of like, because the waters are getting even more muddy, it's becoming harder and harder to know what is considered fair. Like, how many microtransactions is fair? I do, yes, understand that free-to-play games must make money, as I'm sure you do. I think many of us understand that. We understand that these games must make money. But what we're calling into question is not that they make money, or should make money. It's the way they're making money. We don't think that the way that they're making money not only is sustainable. I don't think it's sustainable, especially in the Western market. I think it's also going to be very, very negative for the market overall if it does actually work, because then we're going to pay for less and less quality without having any standards to adhere to, because like there isn't a whole lot of standards in regards to the games that you play these days. No matter how many times people have tried, we can still play. I mean, look at Bless Online. Like, that game is just like so fucking absurd to me. How that one even like passed anybody's inspection, like including the people who were sponsored like to show that game off. How? I have no clue, but my hunch is that it's because people keep being okay with bad business models. It's because people are getting normalized with poor games. It's because of things like that. That, in my opinion, that's the only reason why that sort of stuff would fly. Because remember back in like 2007 through 2011 when all of these blockbuster games were launching? Imagine if a game like Black Desert Online launched back then. I think it would have been beaten up pretty badly, actually. I don't think it would have done very well. I think it actually would have, compared to its competition, and also the market was younger at the time, it would have done much differently. That being said, because it came out when it came out, I mean, both Asian MMOs and ArcAge and Black Desert Online being like these sand park types of games, which they're basically theme parks, but they have some sandbox aspects to them. I don't think they would have been as big as they were if they launched a couple years earlier, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just like everyone has a different definition of fair, and you have all these people who, they automatically assume, oh, a game has this microtransaction, so it's bad. Like, games shouldn't have it. Like, why can't games be like they were back then? And it's like, realistically, if it's a free to play game, you can't do that. Like you said, you have to have some kind of thing for sale, whether it's content, whether it's cosmetics. Like, for me, I don't mind if certain things are paywalled that makes sense. Something for me is like, okay, maybe like an extra emo or like a seasonal thing, like say, Final Fantasy 14, they have like certain emotes, they have like mounts and cosmetics, like clothes and stuff. That isn't so bad to me because they have to make money somewhere. But at the same time, if it's like, okay, you can either buy this item directly or you can get it through a loot box, or remove the option to buy it directly and only loot box. That's where I draw the line, because it's like, why have the loot box directly? Why can't you just give me the option to buy it? And that's what I hate about some games. Like, there's some games I'll gladly pay for a stupid amount than like a serious one, because you don't see that many games, and it's, to me, that's more appealing, is like, I'm playing this game not so much to really be immersed, but to have fun with it and to have enjoyment of it. And the issue is, like, people say, "Oh, well, you shouldn't be able to buy it. You should have to earn it." And then they think using a loot box is earning it. And it's like, nah, that's even worse. That's when it becomes, okay, we need to stop right now, because now this is not even a game anymore. It's just essentially a slot machine at that point.
Yeah, and I'm sure like this is a discussion that you and I could have for probably an hour longer, because it's something that doesn't get discussed enough. Is like partly the cultural differences between MMOs, and I know you're a person who's played more Asian games than most have, so I feel like it's a discussion that you and I could have again sometime for sure. But thanks for stopping by and asking your question.
Yeah, for sure. No worries, man. We should set one up, a podcast, like one of these days, just discussing like the differences between uh microtransactions and all. It'd be fun. It'd be a lot of fun, just kind of dissect. But anyways, that's for another time. You have a good one, man. I always appreciate.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for stopping by. Everybody thank Germa2 for stopping by and asking a question, and also just bringing up the discussion about the cultural differences between these MMOs and the way that they handle microtransactions. I saw some interesting discussion in chat, and I wanted to highlight it. Someone mentioned the difference between a subscription model and a microtransaction model, and it's a brilliant difference. So I'm going to explain the business to you. So whenever somebody realized that you could charge a sub fee for something, that was kind of like a light went off in somebody's head, because it was like, you're saying I can make a persistent world, but then I can also have people pay to keep that world running. It makes sense, right? As a concept, it makes sense. But then after some time, it became more and more difficult to sell people on that, because at the higher ends of the market, WoW was definitely worth $15. On the lower ends of the market, many of those games struggled to even be worth just the box prices they were, charging. So it didn't necessarily work for whatever there's many different reasons why the subscription model didn't end up being like the number one model, at least right now. That being said, the first time people realized that it wasn't such a great model wasn't really because of anything other than, in my opinion, two major points. Free-to-play has the advantage of marketing, right? Marketing as in anybody can just come play it. And then it also has the advantage on, guess what? An unlocked monthly fee. And what I mean by unlocked monthly fee is no longer are you restricted to just $15 a month. Now, you could buy $9 panties, a $20 costume, a $10 or four $10 pets, etc., etc. You could end up spending in a single month in one of these games hundreds and hundreds of dollars on the extreme ends. You might ask why. Why would somebody spend so much money? Well, because developers realized if we're going to do free-to-play, we have to affect the number one aspect of a free-to-play game regards to monetization. The number one aspect, guys, and you can look this up. In any other free-to-play game, what's the number one thing that they always tamper with? I'm actually going to ask this question to you guys, because I like when you listen. What do you think is the number one aspect that you tweak in regards to a free-to-play game and it making more money from microtransactions? I'm curious if this is as... There you go, Rippies. Easy. That was the easiest thing. We pretty much everybody figured it out. Earnings, customization, yes, good answers, progression. These are the number one things, right? So if they can affect your experience, guess what? They can arbitrarily affect your experience. So what that means is, in case of a subscription fee, you can make the argument, oh, they make it slower, so you have to go through it month by month. Come on, guys. Many of us could complete content in a single month in MMOs. I mean, I was a good old school hardcore power gamer myself. I could hit max level in a couple of days in most games. I mean, in fact, I've done it in just about every game I've played. It took me only a couple of days to get to max level. Why? Because I just love doing that kind of thing. I love leveling up quickly. But what if they could change that? What if they could make it to where, in order to level, I needed pets? Well, you affected the number one most important aspect of a game and how it's monetized. Monetized. It was so monetized that it made me say the word incorrectly. But you've affected the number one way of affecting one of them, which is XP gain. Once you affect XP gain, I no longer can objectively trust you. And what I mean by that is that how can I not know that you're not misleading me in other ways? To provide an example, if you have an XP boost on your shop, how do I know that you haven't exploited the game in a way due to you designing it in that way? So let's say designing, not exploiting. You've designed it in a certain way where at some point I'm going to reach a point of attrition, which is what you want in a free-to-play game. You want people to reach a point of attrition. This is a point where they no longer feel like grinding. When they no longer feel like grinding, it means that they're vulnerable, they're willing to spend money. So then it becomes about how can I make them spend money and drive them to the point of attrition? Well, then things like endurance and labor points and daily allowances of certain amounts of points for XP or whatever. There's so many different systems that are created in order to make money off of that. But that's the way that they do it. So this was my long-winded way of explaining why microtransactions are far more insidious than a subscription fee. It's because you don't know where it ends with microtransactions. You don't know where it ends. Where does it end? If you can affect my XP gain, can't you also affect my monetary gain? Yes. Can't you also affect the amount of rarity in a certain item drop that's buyable in the shop? Absolutely you can. Can you create a rare crafting resource that's bought on the shop that can transform my gear into being very powerful? Yeah. It's not pay to win though, right? I'm not buying the item itself. I'm just buying the items that I need to create. You see what I'm saying? It's a lot more insidious because the lines are a lot more blurry. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that every game has bad microtransactions. I never make absolute claims. But what I will say is that many of the current microtransactions that exist in different MMOs are only in existence because of normalization. That we've allowed them to become normal, if you will, to now it's getting to the point to where I'm going to show you guys the first topic that I wanted to bring up in regards to the MMOs on the Go segment, which we're transitioning to now. And it's this game that's recently launched called Kurtzpell. Now, I'm not sure if any of you guys have heard of this game. I talked about it briefly. It's an anime-style MMO, if you want to call it an MMO. It's more so like a co-op game with like 3 to 4 people on screen. One of those sorts of games which is kind of like shows to be a massive multiplayer online game, but it's more so kind of like a lobby online game. So Kurtzpell recently launched, and I will go ahead and... More like a lobby game. Yeah, I guess like a lobby game would be a fair way to put it. So Kurtzpell just recently launched as of April 30th, which is, just about a week ago. And I like how this is the first screen it shows. They know their audience here. Anyway, so you might be wondering, why does it have so many negative reviews? And the main reason that it has negative reviews is, guess what? It's based around the way microtransactions are handled in the game. In fact, there's a post on the MMORPG subreddit that highlights this. Check this out. If you want to see what the future holds for the market, if we don't hold these developers and publishers accountable for the microtransactions that they come up with, if you guys want to see what that looks like, I'm going to show it to you. And boy, is it going to look like some weird Blade Runner pseudo-reality of sorts. Let me find this. Where is this? Here, let me look at my threads. We're doing it live, right? Hey, we're doing it live, boys. Let's go. Doing it live. Okay. Check it out. Kurtzpell. legitimately sells anime panties. He wishes he was kidding. I wish he was kidding too. You can spend $9 on your Marion's Clerk undergarment, or $10 on your Crim's Theatric undergarment. We've gotten to the point now where we will sell just about anything. So whether or not I'm okay with this is kind of not really the point. Because to piggyback on the discussion we were having earlier, I personally have no issue with cosmetics. However, my issue is that most cosmetics aren't just cosmetics. They also come with other benefits. For example, in most Asian MMOs, they also come with an XP bonus, right? That's how it works in Black Desert Online. That's how it works in, frankly, most of them. An undergarment maybe offers no skill in this case, which you can then make the argument, okay, it's not pay to win. Fair enough. But where does it start and where does it stop in regards to what we can monetize and what we can't? Can we monetize weddings now? Can we monetize girlfriends? What if companions? What if we can have an anime girl follow me around in a MMO? Can I pay for that? It's I just can't see a weird dystopian future when I think about microtransactions and paying for like every little bit of enjoyment. So I don't know. You could call this a cultural difference. You could call it whatever you'd like. I will call it, I don't really know if it's something that I'd like to trust in a game. Especially in a game that likes to advertise as being an MMO, when frankly speaking, it's probably barely that, right? And I don't really blame them. I blame other people probably for calling them an MMO, because yeah, like even in their main point here, they don't put MMO in it, but everybody brings it up and everyone refers to it almost as if MMORPG is such a broad term that nobody's really explained in like a bajillion years. Oh, but we've already had that discussion. And yes, we do need to do a video about that. I just don't like to have that video myself, because then I have to be the guy who's like determines what terms mean, you know, which is like, who the hell am I to do that? But I think if I do it in a poll format, maybe create a series of polls and surveys and poll my audience, maybe we could kind of come to at least some sort of middle ground on what particular terms mean. What does pay to win mean? What does MMO mean? What does MMORPG mean? What does open world PvP mean? What does full loop PvP? Like, what does a DOT mean? There's so many things that we could explain, and there is differences of opinions on a couple of them, especially in regards to like how to classify certain games. I just don't typically like to have the discussions of how do you classify things, because I find it very trite and very kind of like, I don't know, it's just kind of boring. It's not really my discussion that I'd like to have. But I feel like we definitely need one. Anyway, that was kind of my transition into showing some of the more absurd aspects of monetization. And I think selling undergarments, sorry, is a bit of an absurd one to me. Now, what else did we have to go over in the MMOs on the Go segment? There's been good news in regards to Jagex. For those who have been following their story, they've been doing quite well since having a mobile port launching, and apparently they've broke 92.8 million euros as of 2019, or sorry, April 30th, 2019. So it's pretty damn impressive. Apparently that's a year-on-year rise of 9.3%. They're doing better than they have in some time. Now, they have a couple of different games that are announced, they've announced that they're working on a couple of games. No details on that exactly, and we don't know if it's another RuneScape IP or it isn't. Apparently, though, they're having their best year, which makes me think, are they going to make an attempt at more projects? I know this has some people worried because they're like, hey, they already tried RuneScape 3. It didn't really work. I know Jagex doesn't have the best track record with doing new projects, but I can't help but at least look at them in this particular case in 2019 and wonder if we should be optimistic. I feel like there's a case to be optimistic here. They've done some pretty good things as of recent, and frankly speaking, I think that they're one of the better companies that operate in the space. So I don't know if it'll be the exact kind of style game that the RuneScape audience is wanting exactly. I don't know if they can even give them that kind of game unless it's just the same game from how I've seen people react to the other RuneScape games compared to old school RuneScape. That being said, I think it's good to see Jagex doing well, But I'm just curious what they're going to do from here. Like, I'm curious about what's the future going to hold for Jagex as a company. Are they going to keep relying on old school RuneScape? Because, of course, as we've mentioned, old school MMOs do reach a point where they no longer can keep trending upwards, right? Because there's no new content. An online world has to constantly evolve in order for it to last forever, right? Otherwise, it's going to reach a point of diminishing returns, or a point where, you know, somebody's experienced the majority of the content already, and it's no longer fresh. Let's see what else we have to talk about in regards to MMOs. Oh, Albion Online, we mentioned that briefly. They've had one of their better launches, which sounds funny to say because they've had a couple of those. But they recently had a free-to-play launch, and the population has jumped, you know, way higher than it has been previously. So this has been a overall positive launch, free-to-play launch for Albion. That being said, I don't want this to make people think that they're necessarily out of the woods yet, because remember, free-to-play games are going to have a higher population, especially right after they launch. It doesn't necessarily mean longevity yet, but if we take a look at this again, maybe in a couple of months, I'm curious to see what these numbers are going to look like on Steam. Because if they're still doing pretty well, I think it's quite obvious that maybe there will be some more ARPG-style MMOs in the future. Maybe something more along the lines of Lost Ark, Albion is possible whenever you see those games start to do well commercially. But I just also think it's interesting that even in 2019, we're seeing games have relaunches, free-to-play relaunches, and still do quite well. So it's becoming more and more commonplace to see games switch to a free-to-play business model. And as it stands right now, while it has had drops in population according to the Steam charts, it looks like Albion overall has been faring pretty well after its change. So there's not a whole lot more for me to say about it. I've already said my piece about the game. That being said, I guess it's good to see at least one of the Kickstarter, well, technically crowdfunded MMOs. It wasn't Kickstarter, but it's good to see a crowdfunded MMO do pretty well, especially one that's, you know, had its share of negative stories. You know, the whole gold selling, gold buying, the what was it, the gold bank, and there's a lot of drama. We've already covered on that before. I think I covered it on another podcast episode, so go check that out. It's got Albion in the title, right? Albion is a boring game. It focuses on the whole sandbox farm thing and is boring and hyper grindy. I mean, yeah, I've already said my opinion of it personally. I made a video on it, and I haven't changed my opinion in the slightest, so... All right, so let's see what else. Oh, there's been some more recent drama in regards to... Actually, you know what? We won't talk about that yet. No, we can talk about it. I was gonna save it until I did my video on it, but it's cool. We can talk about it now. We can talk about Shroud of the Avatar apparently having to address the Kickstarter reward novel fulfillment that they, you know, promised the backers. They were supposed to give them some sort of book companion. There's been a lot of drama concerning this. Apparently, this is, you know, an allegation. It's not 100% fact yet. We don't know both sides of the story. But there was a particular user who said in the comments here, Caleb Cranston, don't look this guy up and harass him, please. But what he ended up saying is that he was actually looking at the particular thread where a user on the Shroud of the Avatar forums was asking about the novel fulfillment. When were they going to get their novel? Because they were a backer. Apparently, this user was tracking Starlong, who's the lead producer on the project. In fact, is Starlong actually... Did he get recently upgraded in his position? I don't think so, but if I remember correctly, he was like a lead producer. Apparently, Starlong was watching the video, or sorry, reading the thread, and actually deleted the thread. And so when you scroll down, he explained this himself. He says if you get an error when you click on the thread that's referenced in the original article, it's because he, being Starlong, deleted the entire thread. You can seriously not make this shit up. So much for honesty and transparency. And he says he's absolutely positive it was him, based on he has moderator in his title. He was watching him viewing the thread. All of a sudden, the thread mysteriously disappeared. That's not looking, very good for Portalarium, the developer for Shroud of the Avatar. There's been a lot of drama surrounding Shroud of the Avatar, and it's a lot of drama that I think I will cover in a video itself. And I did talk about it a lot in my Kickstarter video, which is still going to be coming out. Trust me. That one is coming out. I'm not just promising it. It's just we've been waiting on getting this Asheron's Call video out first, because that one's going to be a big boy. There's been books written on Asheron's Call, people. I have to dig through books. That's how old school that game is. Anyway, man, what do you say about Shroud of the Avatar? It looks like it's been a whole clown fiesta. I feel for the people who've pledged all of this money into it. I also kind of question a little bit of them. Like, I'm not sure why they keep pledging more money into the game. I feel like it's partly because they allow you to make money off of real estate. They're pretty open in regards to how you can make how you can make profit yourself while playing the game. But it's just also like other shady things, like Richard Garriott shedding his title as CEO. Like, that was like a ninja stealth move. And then saying he was never really the CEO. He was more the creative lead. And then it's like, okay. And then now Starlong's deleting threads that are addressing possible, novel fulfillments from the Kickstarter. Man, there's just so much negative going and trending for Shroud of the Avatar. I find it really hard to believe they will make it out of the year. I don't see them surviving 2019 at this rate. They might be getting a death of a game sooner than later. That would make them the first Kickstarter MMO to get a death of a game, and the first Kickstarter MMO to be featured, I think, heavily on the channel, really, at that point. At least, whenever that video would come out. It's starting to look that way, though. Based on all the signs I've seen, population numbers, they lost their studio, by the way. They no longer have a place of employment. They're working from home, so they're like nomads at the moment. No official place of employment. Hemorrhaging through their money, and this was already admitted, right? Their costs are outweighing the amount of money they're making in a month. The CEO shreds his title as CEO, right? Now they're like hushing a lot of the discussions about what was promised. They did a lot of layoffs as well recently. There's just so much writing on the wall for Shadow of the Avatar. Right. What else do we have in the realm of MMOs today? Oh, yeah, there's been another City of Heroes server erected, so we can talk a bit about that. City of Heroes now has a 5th rogue server live as Homecoming, the original, buffs up and works on I24. Continue. Apparently, it boasts over 600 accounts, and it says what requires. Sorry, I was trying to read what the heck that was. But yeah, another server, another rogue server for City of Heroes, another 600 accounts on it. I mean, I bring this up because I really am just curious at this point. Who's gonna play chicken first? Because clearly, I think personally, the company who's in charge of this community, really, they like when you look at Titan. Are they calling themselves Titan Network or Titan? I can't remember what the original company that came up with the source code and is the one hosting the majority of the servers was dubbing themselves. That being said, I can't help but feel like they're playing a little bit of a game of chicken. Because remember, talks are ongoing with NCSoft, which basically means like nothing. So I'm wondering if they're playing chicken in the sense that they're going to keep erecting more and more servers. More community members are going to keep erecting more and more servers because they don't want it to just be backed under one particular group. Apparently, this is an alternative server from a 4chan back group, which say what you will about that. But the point is that the internet, now that they have access to the code, they're not going to let City of Heroes die so easily. So this makes me wonder, is NCSoft just going to keep stamping out every single server? Try and go for one big move and scare everybody with a DMCA? Or are they eventually going to just kind of relinquish and be like, all right, you guys can have community service as long as you don't make money off of it? I don't know. But we will see the next episode of MMOs and the drama surrounding them. Work in progress title, sorry. I'm just happy it's back. Me too. And I just hope it stays as well. I hope it stays. They may probably do something like WoW servers. As long as you are small enough, they will let you live. But if you get too big, you die. It's very likely. It's very likely just because they probably don't want to put the time in to go and shut down all of these servers. I like that more people are erecting servers, though. If only because it's going to be harder to erase City of Heroes. You know? They can shut down the game. They can not allow anybody to purchase the IP. But they can't kill it. It looks like City of Heroes it might have reached its official death, but it's not quite dead yet. Still kicking. It's still kicking. And as somebody who's grown over the years to dislike NCSoft more and more, I'm a little bit amused. I am amused by it. I'm not amused if they end up being shut down and all this legal action taken, because I don't want that to happen. But I'm also starting to wonder if that is going to happen. We're going to have to take some casualties in this war, you know? This is a war. This is a war against these publishers who are trying to erase memories and erase different MMOs. And it's not going to be a war that they will ultimately win. Because the internet, once we get access to something, good luck trying to get it back. Because rogue servers are going to keep coming up, even if they take them down. In fact, that's only going to empower people to want to create more. So it's going to be interesting to watch this whole thing unfold. The big debate now is I-25 versus I-24. It's packed every day. Huh. Interesting. These private servers are a modern-day Spartacus. Okay, what else do we have in regards to the MMOs on the Go segment? Oh yeah, let's clear up some of the rumors. Rumors I have also described on the podcast myself. There were rumors concerning the Disney possible acquisition of Nexon, and apparently, as the article tries to make some pun about, that was, denied. The rumors about Disney controlling all of our destinies, controlling Nexon, yeah, they're not real. Apparently, the actual firms in running are Kakao, Bain Capital, Tencent of League fame and Epic fame, and then a company named Netmarble. So no, Disney is not going to be making a big venture into the world of MMOs anytime soon, at least according to the article. So to clear up any of that confusion or any of those rumors, because they were rumors before for sure. Disney is already scary enough. Yeah, I know. I kind of wanted to see it though, Card. Almost like from like an Alfred perspective. Like just to watch the world not burn, but more so just to watch things change, because they would. One thing I respect about Disney, as scary as they can be, is they will change things. They will change things. So if we wanted the MMO genre to be waking up, Disney would do that, that's for sure. Whether or not that would be a good thing or not, I mean, that, remains to be seen, I guess. It's probably Tencent. It would not surprise me. They have the most, at least from what I could see, them and Kakao have the most experience with multiplayer games. NetEase? Oh god. Is that Netmarble? Is that the same company? Oh wow, check this out. According to the article, it appeared as if Tencent, Netmarble, and MBK would be forming a consortium for bidding. But now apparently Netmarble and MBK are allied against Tencent. So two big, massive, conglomerate companies who have the money and capital required to purchase $9 billion worth of assets valued at Nexon. They're teaming up against big Chinese company Tencent. So it's, it's interesting. Certainly interesting. It's like Game of Thrones, except the winner gets one of the biggest free-to-play MMO companies in existence. It's not really like Game of Thrones, I guess, right? All right, so before I end the podcast, we're going to go to the call-in segment. So this is where you can ask me any question you'd like. As of right now, I'm giving you guys about 20 to 30 minutes left of the podcast to ask me any sort of question. If you have a question you'd like to ask me in voice as well, you can feel free to do that as well. Remember, if you have a question in voice, try and keep it a little bit shorter. That way everybody else gets a chance to ask a question too. Now's the time, though. If you'd like to @me in Twitch chat, you can @me, or you can @card in Twitch chat, or you can also join the Discord, join the podcast lobby, and request a chance to ask the question on the live stream itself. Hey, General Vicinity, thank you for subbing with Twitch Prime, and welcome to the Nor Club. Tip, my dude. Can you imagine how EA would cross over their IPs into Nexon games? I would not want to acknowledge. I would not want to acknowledge that. How about that? Oh, man. EA's already softened up the Western market. Nexon would open us all up. No lube, that's for sure. Doesn't Tencent own like 18% of the video game market? I mean, at this point, it might be even more. Let's get that karaoke. Hey. We need a couple more subs to get the karaoke, but I'm all for it. Actually, currently, let me change what we have on screen. Currently, it's actually 39. So we're almost up to a Mafia stream this Friday. And of course, we're near the halfway point of the karaoke stream. Thanks for the sub, though, General Vicinity. I appreciate it. Good segue, Ludens. Any thoughts on the Q1 earnings call for Activision Blizzard, especially regarding their perspective on future growth? Can you link that in chat? Actually, no, I have it here. You linked it to me earlier. So here's the article that... why won't it let me post articles? Here, can you post the article, Ludens? For some reason, I'm not able to post in my own chat. This has been happening to me. Anyway, the point that he brought up and that he will post shortly in chat is there was a earnings call recently where the COO for Blizzard had this quote to say. He said, "But we see real growth taking place." Okay, so now I don't know, it won't let me post articles for some reason. Anyway, the COO had this to say. He says, "But we see real growth taking place in in-game revenues, in mobile, in Asia, in free-to-play, and in esports. I just mentioned, and in in-game advertising. So for us, repositioning is really about setting up the right resources to be able to dedicate to those growth initiatives and take advantage of them as we head into the coming years." This doesn't surprise me, right? And doesn't surprise many of us who understand the way business works, especially for a company the size of Activision Blizzard. I mean, they've essentially created this, like, we can't fail mentality. And what I mean by that is that after the scale past a certain point gets brought up to the point to where you're the size of Activision Blizzard and you're having earnings calls and shit, and I think they have like 1,000+ people who work at both companies combined. Point being is when you get to that size, you're no longer really focused on a macro level of the art. You're just focused on how can we maximize the amount of profit that we make, because we have to pay a lot of different people and we got to give our COOs and CEOs some big old nice fat paychecks and stuff. But no, we're just doing it for the cost. And, you know, games are expensive, guys. Games are expensive, says the guy who gets paid a couple $100,000 a year. Games are just so expensive, man. Anyway, this is more par for the course, I would say. And frankly speaking, I want to be optimistic because I look at WoW Classic and I'm like, man, this could mean something. And it could be a turning point for Blizzard even as a company with regards to how they've been handling the WoW IP and just MMOs in general. That being said, I'm more and more starting to realize that maybe they really are just going to launch Classic WoW and just leave it that way. I really am starting to think that now. And I didn't think that before. And I know that sounds weird, but I'm starting to think that more and more. Just because it almost seems like maybe they just don't even want to bother with it. Maybe it's not even worth the bothering, because if they think that they're going to throw in-game revenues, mobile shit, free to play, and esports and all this like in-game advertising stuff, and WoW Classic fans aren't going to be up in arms, I mean, come on, guys. I feel like the WoW Classic fans absolutely would be against many of those things being erected in their game. So I don't even know what they're going. I don't even know if they know what they're going to do with WoW Classic. They don't actually know what they're going to do. Actually, we know that now. They haven't announced when they're going to launch it. We have no idea about when exactly the next 8. Is it 8.3 now? Changes are coming. I've heard summer. We don't know for sure. Are they going to launch that first, then maybe do WoW Classic? It just seems like they have their hands full with doing both of those at the same time, especially. Do you think that there will be some more weird overlap between MMOs and real life, like the lobbyist who was also a representative in Eve? He was falsely accused, by the way. Yes. I mean, I'm surprised it hasn't happened more, if I want to be honest. Like, frankly speaking, I bet you there's a lot more stories like that. We just don't know about them because they didn't either get falsely accused or they were never brought to light. But I think that MMOs are they're a hotbed for politics, and especially tribalism. So it doesn't surprise me at all, I guess I should say. Oh yeah, Gardener, I appreciate the sub. Welcome to the Nor Club, and here is your tip, man. I don't want to leave you without your tip. Just the tip, though. Just the tip. Speaking of Activision Blizzard, what are your thoughts on the whole BlizzCon app shenanigans? So I actually was going to mention this, and then I forgot about it. So let's talk about it a bit. Should be on here somewhere. Let's see. For those unaware, Blizzard has a big event every year called BlizzCon. And for BlizzCon 2019, it was already leaked to people, I guess, or explained, or I don't know if it was a press release or somebody leaked it. But apparently you're going to have to be using a particular app in order to access BlizzCon. And it's an app called, I think is it Access? It's funny because I used to watch the channel Access. Check it out. Gamers warn that the Access mobile app needed to enter BlizzCon is spyware levels of bad. So people talked about the permissions. Apparently it wants your mobile device contact information, your location, your camera, your Wi-Fi connection, your network information. What else? Battery stats, permission to run the phone at startup or run on the phone at startup, permission to prevent the device from sleeping. That's like my best monk-ass impression. Whenever someone says that they're giving my app the ability to not let the phone go to sleep, man, that's got me all kinds of worried for sure. I don't even know what to say about this, man. Like, I really don't know what to say. What did they expect exactly? Are they expecting anything? Is this really another Overton window of like, hey, we're going to do something stupid, but then we're going to say, oh, sorry. And then be like, oh, I didn't realize this was such a big problem. I don't know. You might say, as the article writer, Chris Neal himself says at the end, in conclusion, really, you could say this is just people being over the top. And sometimes people can be over the top with regards to apps. I mean, shit, I remember when I would download any software as a kid, everybody thought it was a virus. So I get that. It could be a little bit of that. You know, the good old fear hysteria. But I mean, I listed a lot of very questionable things there. And not to mention, people are already afraid of the whole mobile thing in Blizzard. With the whole, don't you guys have phones? You know, like, so I just feel like this is so tone deaf. It really makes me think they're making these decisions from the boardroom. Because how can they continue to be so tone deaf about it? It just, It's bewildering to me to see such a company that was known for having the pulse of their audience continue to lose the pulse over and over again, like egregiously. And again, you might argue that this is not, non-consequential. This is not really a big issue, and maybe I would even agree. But my argument here is like, why are they even doing it in the first place? Did they not expect more negative stigma, more negativity from this? You didn't think people would look into this shit? Like, it's 2019. Like, we're not gonna just download apps anymore and not question things. Like, I mean, I guess some people will, but the audience that's interested in playing WoW probably is a little bit more interested in looking things up, right? Because they already live on the internet. It's so they don't have to ask the crowd if they have phones. Well, we actually know today that we don't have to ask the question of if everyone has phones, because we have everyone signed into our local app, the Access mobile app. So we actually know that you have phones. Checkmate. Some Blizzard guy said that somewhere. Allegedly. The ironic part is that Blizzard has an authenticator they could just use easily for verification with all the extra scary stuff. Yeah, I'm kind of really, I'm really confused about that point as well, because I used an authenticator when I played WoW as well. Honestly, a ticket can just be a good QR code in an email. Yeah, that's another one as well. But they want the data to track how long people spend there, what booths, what events, queue times, and so on. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Every single thing has to be monitored and kept in a database for future reference. Yeah, so they can find more ways to make more money. Woohoo! It's all in the love of money. It'd be too good if Activision Blizzard was coming up with this. It has to has to be someone else. I'm old-fashioned. I like to get my physical ticket. I'm the same way. I like going to conventions. Just give me a physical ticket. You know? Like, the app and all that stuff, give me, like, the ability to do that, but don't force me to do it. Because if you force me, I'm probably not going to want to go. One of the later things they added to WoW was the authenticator that gave you 4 extra base backpack slots. I mean, that's just about in every game, I feel like. Alright, so apparently we do have somebody waiting. I'm going to go ahead and drag them in. JLB wanted to ask a question. I'm not sure what he wanted to ask, so let's go ahead and ask him or her. Hey, JLB, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, you have a question you'd like to ask?
Right. It might be on the longer side, but I'll try to be concise. Um, as we both agree, I think one of the main reasons that MMOs aren't exactly what they used to be is the like a focus on the community aspect of those games, and I agree with most of your opinions as to why that came to pass. But thinking recently, I want to know your opinion on whether the infrastructure of the world itself might have affected it, in that most of the old school MMORPGs, they belong to the early 2000s or even the late 90s, when the internet, well, it's hard to imagine the internet not being what it is now, but it used to be kind of not really there. From what I know, you didn't play much of classic WoW, but do you know the phenomenon of the Baron's chat
Oh,
and
yeah.
Mankrook's wife?
Yeah, for sure.
That would never exist in the world of 2019 or moving forward. There's Google and there's all sorts of sites. There's a billion guides on YouTube, and plainly speaking, I don't. Classic WoW is my main source of inspiration for this question. I didn't actually play it, but I have tight contact with a lot of people who did, and I know relatively how it was. Essentially, those old games, they weren't sandboxes that were there. They weren't, yes, they were theme parks by and large, after WoW especially, but they were less so attractions that you went to, played around, and then left. They were obstacles that you and your server were there to try to overcome. The attunements in WoW, the early attunements, the General Windsor or Marshal Windsor quest line for Onyxia. Imagine that in the world of today. Back then, you needed a guild to guide you through it. Now you wouldn't need that. You have easy access to all sorts of information. You don't need to interact with people as much. It's a choice now, not a necessity to survive. You can play solo more easily, which isn't exactly the point, in my opinion. So I'd like to know what you think on that.
Okay, so you would say, like, I guess your question is, what other things do I think made those certain games work? Sorry, like, to be
No, to be more specific, I wonder if these kinds of games can function in the modern infrastructure when everyone can much more easily have access to all sorts of resources and information, especially in WoW Classic, because, well, it was out for like 7 years before it was shunted.
Okay.
Would it even be the same?
Yeah, so funny enough, like, I've heard this a lot, and I think it's a good point. Like, it's a good point that people make, and I like that you kind of surrounded it with the whole recent classic revival, or whatever you want to call it, because that's definitely been a topic of discussion recently. I think like, the way I think about this one is, let me just offer a bit of my perspective, and I think it'll help people understand kind of the way I think this way more. Star Wars Galaxies was like the first MMO that I ever had to really look anything up for. It was also one of my first MMOs, period. So very early on playing that game, I knew I lacked the knowledge, right? Even just loading into the game, I could feel that I lacked the knowledge. And I was always one of those kids who just wanted to understand things. So even back then, I was going to websites like Alakazam, as Ludens will describe in chat. It's an old school website that used to have coordinates. That's how we used to find these things. Back then, it wasn't videos, it wasn't screenshots. It was just, they gave you a coordinate. They're like, hey, the dude's over here in this coordinate. You just went to a coordinate and you showed up and you didn't know what to expect. So yeah, there was still a level of, like, I guess, surprise, if you will. But really, I mean, the ironic thing is that when I went back to play Star Wars Galaxies, I thought of that myself. I thought, now that I know the game and there's a lot more information about it after the NGE had came out, I was like, it's probably going to be much easier to navigate through certain things. And the funny thing is that in many of its complex systems, it's not the case. It's still complex. And I think the reason for that being that even if you have knowledge, it doesn't automatically mean that you can just do it, like, perfectly. Like, having knowledge in itself isn't the only advantage. Like, you have to have not only the knowledge, but you have to know how to actually use the knowledge to your advantage. So, like, if I know that I have to go here to do this certain quest line, and then I have to go here to, like, do this hidden quest line, yeah, it's going to take away a lot of the, like, I guess, mystery and allure of it, because I know that it's like a secret. But let's say I go and I look up, like, how to do a Nixia, or I look up how to do Molten Core or whatever. That's been on the internet for a number of years now, and people still struggle to finish it. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, my argument has always been, really, because it's my own personal experience, that people have been looking up shit since the dawn of time, basically. Since, I mean, back then, sure, we were looking up at the wall and seeing, like, scribbles on the wall and shit, but, like, when the internet came into existence and was, you know, pushed forward by these online games, I've always been living on the internet. I've always been looking things up. I've always been wondering obsessively about certain min-maxing and different things like that. So I guess I describe this to let people know kind of my perspective. It never really felt like I did this later, after, like, the internet blew up. For me, it always just felt like I was just on the internet, and that was just a part of it, was, like, looking things up. Yeah, like, exactly. It was like a bonus. It was like, if I could get caught off guard by something, it was really cool that I did get caught off guard by it. But generally speaking, I had no issues knowing a lot of the knowledge and still enjoying the game. To further go into kind of what you were saying about the whole classic revival thing, do I think it's going to affect it in some level? Absolutely. But do I think it's going to have as big as an effect as maybe other people are thinking? Probably not. And I think the main reason is that I've played Classic WoW now, and, you know, in hindsight, going back to play it. And even though I have a lot of the same information, and I've also been a long time MMO player of, you know, 15 plus years, I've struggled to get past certain parts of the game. So I see it as, like, that perspective of, like, you know, don't worry, guys. If I'm struggling through it, tons of people are going to struggle through it. There's going to be some hard parts. There's still going to be tons of opportunities to create groups, to create guilds, to work together, to have all of those fun community aspects and moments. To actually switch gears a little bit, though, the bigger problem, for me at least, is not that it's a lack or it's an overabundance of knowledge. It's actually more so that we've intentionally, more so over time, removed aspects that were required for social interaction. And we've continued to do it. So say, for example...
And that is part of my counterpoint that I was going to bring up,
Okay.
if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, I might have not phrased the question entirely perfectly, because I agree, people used to be doing that all the time. Specific types of people, such as yourself, probably myself if I wasn't 8 when World of Warcraft came out. But since then, the market and the games themselves have changed, and people changed with them. The player bases themselves are completely different now. They don't expect to have to do those things. It's not an instinct to go out and ask people and try to forge some kind of working relationship. Or to go and start figuring something out. They want to have the Twitch stream person to follow. They want to have all these YouTube videos to follow click by click. They're not used to it, and I'm not sure how well they're going to take it. Or how they'll take future games. Classic is fine, I think. Well, it will be until it turns out that no more new content is going to drop. But then other future games that try to do the same thing those games did, they'll have a huge issue in that the new audience that came in the late 2000s, so that they're not going to have as much of an expectation of figuring things out. They'll have to be incentivized somehow, but I have no idea how that's going to be done.
No, I understand your point though. Like it is a good point of like it's kind of a question of, do you think the current market is going to maybe be as acceptable or be as willing to do those things that people were willing to do previously? And I mean, like, first I'll just say that I don't think they will, just on the simple basis of back then we sort of did things because we didn't know any better. So it was kind of like, you think about the Jedi Holocron grind in Galaxies, and it was one of these like insane grinds that's mentioned. Just, but about I would say everybody.
It was like a playground mystery you tell your friends, and then it turns out to be real.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And it started as a thing where it was kind of like people didn't even know if it was a real thing. Period. And then it slowly was like this rumor, and then people, next thing you know, you see a Jedi, and so obviously that kind of thing is not going to exist because I think that system, any system that's completely reliant,
get data mined as soon as the game is released.
Right? Exactly. Any system that's too reliant on catching you off guard or being like mysterious, especially in an online environment, a lot of that shit's gonna get figured out. So yeah, maybe you don't want to make mystery your biggest like thing that you sell with your game, because people are gonna figure all that shit out. But maybe that's why discovery isn't used more as a main feature in games, by the way. But I still do think that even in current day marketplace, being somebody who's reading WoW Classic forums and reading also just regular Blizzard forums, I'm reading a lot of different posts from just average WoW fans who never played Classic WoW, who are saying like, you know what? I know that certain things I'm going to miss, and I'm probably going to be a little bit caught off guard by a couple of things, but I'm really eager to see if this is like the kind of experience that either people are explaining it to be, or if it's just a better experience of what I'm currently experiencing, period. I think if it is for some people... I am
one of those people calling you in.
Okay.
I am that player.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I think that's interesting. I think if the person has a perspective of like, hey, I come from a current perspective, but I'm eager to try it because I'm seeing like maybe what I'm missing out on, if I did miss out on anything, I think it's a cool scenario where people get to compare an old school game to a new school game, and that's what I do basically for a living. And I think it offers you a lot of perspective that otherwise you wouldn't have. I think that's why I always tell people, if you're interested about the old school games, go play them, just so you can see what people are talking about. Maybe you won't get it in the same exact lens. It won't be WoW Classic of 2004. I'll be the first to say that, for sure. But that being said, it will still be a pretty momentous launch, of course. And I'm seeing a lot of opinions trending in the opposite direction that I was mentioning earlier, where they kind of are eager to see if this classic WoW thing is what it's shaken up to be, or is what it's advertised as. So I don't know if they'll end up being okay with it, and I certainly don't think they will in the long term, but we've already kind of had that discussion before. But we'll see, as you said, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just hopeful that people at large don't reject it, because I'd rather the revolution came earlier than later, and clearly the market needs one. That's about all I have. Thanks for entertaining my question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
And thanks for your content. I'm a recent addition to the Discord and the Twitch chat, but I've actually been watching since the Warhammer Online retrospective. So there. Thanks for your work.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that, and also thank you for stopping by and asking a question.
Yep.
If everyone also can thank JLB in chat, that'd be great.
Mm-hmm. And thank you too.
Yeah. So that was a good point, and those are 2 points that kind of get brought up, and I feel like they get brought up enough to where I probably will make a video about them. Like the idea of, by the way, Mad Season Show, is that what he calls himself? Has an awesome YouTube channel where he covers the topic of nostalgia, and he actually specifically covers it in regards to World of Warcraft. If you haven't heard of Mad Season Show and you haven't seen any of his content, and you're at least somewhat interested in classic WoW or just WoW in general, I really recommend this website. This channel. Mad Season Show does amazing videos. He does very informative videos. He does nostalgic videos. He does artistic videos, and he'll even do like things like patch reviews and go over like particular things in classic, like maybe the worst items, the best items. He does so much WoW content on his channel that if you're thinking about it, he's probably already covered something like it. He's got race picking guides. He's got class picking guides. I'm giving this guy a shout out just because I think he does really good content. But he also, the video I'm talking about in particular is this one. Nostalgia in World of Warcraft. If you guys haven't seen this video, I really recommend watching this, because this guy, not only does he have a similar style of channel as to my channel, has a great intro, but he also has a more kind of like, I would say, even-keeled and relaxed approach to content.
What's up, Mad
which
Season
for me
here,
is very pleasant to listen to, because I don't like when people yell at me or talk too fast.
Forums.
So I'm not going to spoil this video, but basically he goes over the concept of nostalgia and re-experiencing the same games, and he also talks about World of Warcraft and kind of why nostalgia is a bit of an interesting or different, maybe even weird concept in regards to how MMOs function. And this is something that I'll tackle in a video as well, the topic of nostalgia, because I think he went about it in a very interesting way. He brought up a couple good analogies, and he also showed people very real, easy to understand examples. I'm going to take it in a little bit different of a way. I want to explain it in regards to game theory and design. I want to show people that when we talk about old school MMOs, we're not talking about just nostalgia. We're talking about actual literal like systems and code in the game, like the framework of the game, the design that is actually good, and there's something to either learn from that or, frankly speaking, to implement from that itself. So my argument is actually more of like, I would say, a logical argument. It's based around the idea that I don't just think that old school MMOs are good, I think they're better objectively. And I've made my argument many times, and I continue to make my arguments, and hopefully you guys will understand more and more why I make those arguments. But yeah, if you haven't seen this video and you'd like to watch some WoW content, maybe you're thinking about getting into WoW Classic, seriously, huge shout out to Mad Season Show. He's not a clickbaiter. He does really informative stuff, and he's also just really relaxed delivery. So if that's your sort of thing, I think you'll enjoy it. I think Card's pinging me. All right, yeah, so it's been 2 hours, so I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a last 3 minutes to let me know any last minute questions you have for me. No more call-ins, sorry. I think we're done with those. We had 2 really good call-ins today. I'd like to thank JLB and also Germa2 for those. But if you have any more questions in chat you guys would like to ask me, go ahead now. You can open up the floor to anything you can think of, anything you can imagine. The nostalgia video is art. It's the best video on nostalgia that I've ever seen, not just in games, it's perfection. I think it's really good because he covers the emotional aspects of it. And that's why I said, like, I think he did that video so great and different than the way that I want to do my video. So I think it's a broad enough topic that I also can cover it. That being said, I actually brought up Mad Season Show as an example of the kind of WoW content that I would be more so interested in doing, which is kind of more like philosophical, more generalistic approaches to it. I mean, frankly speaking, guys, when WoW Classic comes out, I'm going to be covering it, as you guys know, because I'm going to be playing it at least until I've, reached my threshold, which at the moment, I'd like to have 2 to 3 max level characters, and then I would also like to have at least a rank 13 PvP character. Those are my goals at the moment with Classic WoW, but who knows if the content takes off, if the stream takes off. It could be something I do more so. I just don't know yet. Frankly, I don't know. But I bring up Mad Season Show as well to tell you guys that, hey, I have no intentions of making super specific WoW content about, this update and what's the patch history here and this, but I'm not going to come from the perspective of some classic WoW OG dude. That's not me. That's Mad Season Show. If you want to watch a guy who's been playing WoW for ages and also knows a shit ton about it, go watch his content. But if you'd like to see somebody's perspective who maybe wasn't caught up in the whole WoW craze initially, and also, frankly speaking, is kind of revisiting it now with like less of a nostalgic lens, because I never had that nostalgia to start off with. If that's what you're more so interested in, then you can also watch my WoW content. If not, if you want to go to somebody who's got a lot more experience with it, I'd go check out Mad Season Show. Anyway, just giving him a shout out. I was able to quit. You'll be back. I do think videos trying to break down the language used to describe gaming would be beneficial. But the way it has to be approached probably can't be definitive definition for a term, because it'd definitely be a daunting task to do. But I'd like to know if you'd attempt it. Yeah, so Rippies, this is something I think you and I have discussed kind of like offhand before. I've just been trying to think about how I would have the discussion, as you mentioned, because many of the points I like to raise to you guys are based on like what I would call a definitive claim or like a descriptive claim. The best evidence as a detective, of course, is the most real evidence, right? It's the most pertinent to the case. So like, if I know that this guy was killed, if I can find the murder weapon, that's really pertinent information, right? However, maybe knowing what he had for dinner the day before could matter in some way isn't really that important, right? So to bring it back to what Rippies is saying about having the discussions of different language, the reason why this is so integral, guys, is that if we don't know the correct way to have terminology to describe certain types of games or types of experiences, we're not going to know how to describe them. So other people are going to start to describe them for us. And what that means is that they're going to tell us what's fair, what isn't fair, what's considered a good business model, what isn't considered a good business model. And if you let the market decide that, we're going to be paying out of our ass in things. So the reality is of the situation, we do need to know, what does an MMORPG mean? What does an MMO mean? Obviously, I'm not the expert here. Now, yes, I know many of you guys come to me, you ask me for questions, and I know I've played probably more MMOs and, time spent in my life more than probably the top 0.001% of people in the world, right? But I don't call myself an expert. Right? And I don't call myself an expert because I don't like the association that goes with that. But the other thing is that I'm just one of you guys who just cares a lot about figuring this shit out. That's kind of how I see it. I don't really see myself as like some expert or whatever. If you want to know an expert, talk to somebody like Raf Koster, right? Talk to him. That's an expert. That's somebody who knows how to create a world. So those are the experts. I'm not the expert. But anyway, that I know you guys are going to give me so much shit for that, because you will never hear me give myself a whole lot of credit. And it's always been something I've struggled with, I think, because for me, I like to look at things from the perspective of, if I'm an average Joe who doesn't have like years and years of obsession of looking at MMOs, can I also come to the same conclusion? That's how I like to like think of my videos and write my videos. And I didn't initially write them that way, but I write them more so nowadays like, how could I explain this to somebody who maybe doesn't really do something like this, or maybe hasn't played the game before? It's not so easy to do, right? It takes a little bit of skill, a little bit of tact, a little bit of subtlety, nuance to be able to introduce somebody to a game or a style of game who has no experience of it and keep them interested. I think the hardest thing for me personally has always been, for the longest time, guys, the hilarious thing now, 2019, it's May, it's the 6th of May. I've reached a point where I've finally gotten to this weird position where I can look back at my life and be grateful that I spent all of these times playing video games, all of these times looking up guides and min-maxing and talent builds and, you know, best in slot and playing 36 hours in a row in SWOTOR so I can get one of the first max level characters in the game. Like, so many of these crazy, dumb, you know, addictive things I did in my young childhood. I'm glad at all of those mistakes, all of those good experiences, bad experiences, whatever, that amalgamation of experiences, period, has brought me to where I am today, to where I can finally say it wasn't a complete waste of time. Take that, parents. No, I'm just kidding. But it did feel like that for the longest time, you know? Like, it was like I spent so much time playing MMOs and getting good at them. It was kind of like, what was the point? Back then, there wasn't really MMO esports. You know, World First didn't get you paid in anything. And doing guides was kind of like more Wild West, right? It was harder to know how to create a channel and create a business off of it. I'm glad that things have progressed enough in gaming now to where I can even be in this position in the first place. But I'm also just glad that I did go through all of those experiences. I'm glad that I played all of the bad MMOs. I'm glad I played the good ones. I'm glad I missed playing the good ones. I'm glad I don't miss playing the bad ones. You know, it's kind of like you can hold yourself accountable and be negative with yourself in regards to, like, maybe a game that you trusted in that wasn't so great. But I think at the end of the day, all we can do is just learn from our experiences. And I just hope that we learn from our experiences in regards to how MMOs have shaked out so far. And I think that that's what makes Classic WoW so interesting to me, is I think that it's like the first time that you can have a general audience member experience modern WoW and then go play Classic. And many of them, in my opinion, we'll see if I'm right, many of them are going to be like, wait a minute, this is better. It sucks because of this and that, but it's better because of this and that. And people are going to start to be able to compare those games together again and actually look at them in one-to-one comparisons. Other people are going to hear that and see that. Other developers, other creators, other people like us, players, consumers, that sort of thing. It's going to be a slow shift, but I'm going to be very, very optimistic about it, and I'm very eager to see it all unfold. I mean, I can't wait. I can't wait. But yeah, so I've reached the end of my podcast. I think I've ranted enough with you guys. I've also answered enough of the questions. If you would like to ask me a question and you didn't get to ask me this week, you can always at me, at Card, at Zila, and let us know in chat on our Discord. You can at Ludens as well, on any of the moderators, really. Just let them know that you have a question. They'll post it in the secret podcast channel, and we'll try and get to it next week. I really cannot wait to get to the point, guys, where I can start playing MMOs with you guys, because that was an initial goal of my channel, really, was to create not just a community where I can talk about old school games and highlight them, but also find a community that I can then go on and play new games with. And we haven't got to do that a whole lot. We've tried Legends of Aria. We tried a little bit. I don't even remember what the other game is that we tried. I guess we tried a little bit with Darkfall as well. These games didn't really shake out. The good news and the good thing about Classic WoW is we at least know it can last 1 to 2 years. At least we have that going for us. So on that note, I think I'll go ahead and end the podcast. Again, thanks to everybody who took the time to watch all the way through, who watched at any point, who either watched it live, whatever you did. I really appreciate that. Also, those who've been supporting me on YouTube, who share my videos, who like my videos, whatever type of support that you give me, I'm eternally grateful for that. And let's just keep figuring this out. That's what I like most about the channel, is I feel like because I'm open to you guys, because I get to talk to you guys a lot, and I'm very accessible, it feels like we're going through this journey together. You know, we're trying to figure out Classic WoW together. That's what it feels like, rather. It feels like we're trying to discover, what do these acronyms mean? What do these terms mean? Before I leave, actually, I'm going to ask you guys one last question, just out of curiosity. Would you guys be interested in me doing a general MMO series? And what I mean by general, I mean it's not really about any MMO in particular, but maybe covers things such as like key bindings, how to do proper research, how to create a talent build, how to join a clan, maybe how to lead a clan, like very generalistic MMO things. I've always wanted to do videos on those topics, but I never could think of doing it in the right kind of way. Now I have the right kind of aesthetic, I have the right kind of channel, and I have a kick-ass editor, so it's very possible for me to do videos like that. And I still think they're viable. I still think they could be done. Because I look at what's out there right now, and I've always felt this way too, but I feel like there's not a whole lot of videos that explain what makes MMOs unique, or really what makes, like, what's the skill in an MMO? I mean, many people ask that. It's not aim, so what is it? And I feel like I could explain that. I could explain maybe how to make better decisions in regards to in-game, guys. Don't send me anything about your psyche evaluations. If anything, I could use my own at this point. Detectives might serve as the earpiece in many different series, but this particular detective is maybe more so interested in not being driven insane. I guess Sherlock wasn't so he wasn't so interested in not being insane. He already felt like he was partly insane with all the drugs and whatever else he was shooting up. A lot of MMO content creators lack the perspective that you have. It'd be interested in your game design analysis and comparative analysis more than guides, but I'd watch guides. You know what? The game design analysis is another thing that I can go into. So let me describe this one last thing for you before Card wants to shoot me with his with his rifle that he doesn't own right now. By the way, I don't want him to get in trouble over there if there's any laws. But his how about this? He's got phaser set on kill right now. If I don't end this podcast. So the idea with the channel that we've kind of figured out, and I think this is the best way to make any sort of new content received in the most positive light, is that whenever we bring in another content creator to create content, they're going to be their own character, which means their own brand of detective. The main central theme on the channel is that every character involved is going to be a detective. That being said, we're not all going to be a monochromatic detective. We're not all going to be NS, right? They're going to have different personalities. And I bring this up because I was thinking more and more, this will allow me to specialize in MMO content. And it allows me to come up with more series that specifically highlight things like maybe design aspects, maybe guides, maybe more analysis with why I like certain combat models and I don't like certain combat models and things like that. It allows me to be more specific into MMOs. Because I can bring on a content creator who maybe does more narrative content, or maybe bring one in who does more shooters or things like that. That's at least my view with it. And I bring that up because I think this really kind of helps explain some of the vision that we have, which is ultimately, you know, NS is the MMO guy. You know, that's kind of like the point of me creating this character. Multiplayer games are what I'm interested in. Massive multiplayer games, sign me up, right? Those are the games that I'm the most interested in. So I'm glad to see that many of you are interested in seeing more MMO content, because I'd never planned on not having more MMO content. That being said, I vaporize. Good point, Card. Let's see what people said. I like a combat system video and PvP MMOs work videos, sort of things like that. Okay. It does engage but that could be attributed to my general interest in MMOs. Yeah, that could be. There's not a whole lot of MMOs that really require a whole lot of skills, so maybe right now it seems like it kind of, you know, would not really fit making a guide or something like that. But yeah, so I'll experiment. That's a good point. RPT B1. That's a good point. I'll experiment and we'll figure it out. Point being is more MMO content. I'm never stopping that. I can't help it, guys. I was bit by this bug when I was a kid, okay? Like, some bug crawled up on me when I was a young kid on a chat site, you know, cybering away as a young 7-year-old boy. I know, I was a weird kid. But I had to find something to do, I guess. It's not like I didn't only cyber, okay? That's just my joke. I was more so racing with furniture, which, for those who know Habbo, you're probably laughing. If you've never heard of Habbo Hotel Races, go look that up. And no, it's not a racial thing. But go look up Habbo Hotel Races, and that's what your boy was doing in his first MMO ever online. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Thank you for stopping by to watch episode 32 of the podcast, 6 Pixels Under. I was Nerd Slayer. I am Nerd Slayer. I always will be Nerd Slayer, whether or not I'm here or not. See you guys later.